Welcome to the deep dive, where we take these intricate blueprints of expertise, of research, of mastery, and we break them down into practical, unforgettable insights just for you. Our mission today is, I think, a really exhilarating one. We are going backstage to analyze the fundamental DNA of narrative itself.
Hmm.
We're not just talking about popular genres or, the mechanical three-act structure. We are looking underneath the surface at this hidden dramatic code that master storytellers use.
Right.
It's a system that allows stories to feel, quite literally, like living, breathing, organic creatures that grow and evolve. We're unpacking the structural secrets that define true character change, whether you're reading a novel, watching a film, or seeing a play.
And that idea of an organic structure
Yeah.
that's the immediate context we need to set up for you. Because our sources consistently argue that a great story is not a simple copy of real life.
No?
It's something much more precise. It's a story world. It's life, but condensed and heightened.
Distilled,
Yeah.
almost.
Life distilled, exactly.
It allows us a better, clearer understanding of how existence and maturation actually work. The genius, like you said, is in that hidden process below the surface. This is the code of growth.
A code of growth.
Yeah. The audience might be following the action and the plot on the surface, but what truly resonates, what sticks, is that essential code of human maturation, or critically, the failure to mature.
Ah, yes.
If the change feels earned, the story feels true.
And that focus on earning the change, I think that's the key distinction. It ensures we aren't just absorbing passive information. We're experiencing an active moral and psychological education. By the time we're done with this deep dive, you should have a really comprehensive framework for diagnosing and appreciating what makes a narrative truly resonate.
Okay, so let's unpack this. This core dramatic code, where's the spark? If a story world is a heightened expression of life, what is the fundamental fuel? What drives all the conscious living things within it? What makes a character move?
The dramatic code has a really clear and decisive answer to that. And it kind of flips traditional philosophy on its head.
How so?
It says that change is fueled by desire. It's this profound shift away from the rational intellectual ideal of, say, René Descartes. I think, therefore I am.
Right, the classic.
And it moves to something fundamentally primal and really action-oriented in the context of drama, which is, I want, therefore I am.
I want, therefore I am.
Yes. Desire in all its facets, from the physical need for water to the abstract craving for justice or love, that's what propels characters. It gives them direction. It forces them into conflict.
So the writer's job is really to track that desire.
Obsessively. The writer's job is to become an obsessive tracker of that desire. What exactly does this person want in this moment? What will they do to get it? And crucially, what spiritual, moral, or psychological costs do they pay along the way?
The costs.
Yes. The narrative is simply the record of that pursuit and all its consequences.
I really appreciate that philosophical distinction because it immediately tells you, the listener, that a dramatic narrative isn't about contemplation. It's about action.
Right.
The narrative spine is inherently about tracking this want, this desire. And if a character wants something and they're impeded, which is the very definition of drama, they're forced to struggle. And struggle, as the theory suggests, is the only catalyst strong enough to force profound character change.
Precisely. You can synthesize this into the storyteller's ultimate sort of binary goal.
Okay.
You're either going to present a profound change in a character, a true, measurable movement toward maturity, or you're going to illustrate precisely why that change did not occur,
Which is tragedy.
which is the definition of tragedy or stagnation.
Exactly. Drama is fundamentally a code of maturity. Its focal point is that moment of impact when a person breaks free of old habits, weaknesses, and the ghosts of their past to transform, to become a richer, fuller self, both psychologically and morally. That promise of becoming a better version of yourself, or the tragic failure of it, is why audiences invest so heavily.
But this raises a big question for me. Doesn't that make every story sound identical? If it's all just desire and impediment leading to struggle,
Right.
how do we distinguish between high art, a simple action movie, or, an epic poem?
That's where the medium comes in. This is where it gets really specific. The size and the scope of that character arc, that transformation, is dictated by the form you choose.
Ah, so the medium defines the magnitude of the change we should expect.
Exactly. Take myth, for instance. Because myth is typically focused on explaining some foundational truth or a generational conflict, it shows the widest character arc possible.
So we're talking about transformations spanning from birth to death,
Yeah.
or even from, say, an animal state to the divine. Huge, sweeping, generational transformations that often establish the values of an entire culture.
Right. That explains why reading an ancient epic feels like such a massive undertaking. Whereas plays, they typically do the opposite, don't they?
They do the opposite. They focus in
Yeah.
really tight, concentrating on the main character's single, critical moment of decision, the tipping point where the entire trajectory of their life shifts, often happening over just a few hours. The focus is the intense pressure of that one moral choice.
Okay. And then you have American film.
Right. This structure, because of its runtime and commercial needs, usually shows a much smaller, more concentrated change. But, and this is key, the change is achieved by seeking a limited specific goal with great, often overwhelming intensity.
It's the difference between a panoramic sweep and a laser focus.
A laser focus.
Yeah.
Defeating a terrorist in a skyscraper. That's a perfect example.
And finally, serious novels. They have the space to do a bit of both, I imagine.
They do. They can depict how a person interacts with and changes within an entire society, or they can drill down into the mental and emotional processes leading up to a change with, surgical precision.
Because they have access to the internal monologue?
They can spend hundreds of pages inside a character's head watching the change actually gestate. And then, television drama, by contrast, shows a number of characters within a mini-society all struggling to change at the same time, leveraging that ongoing serialized nature of the medium. You, the viewer, get to watch their development happen over years. #Hedge, the 7 key steps of organic structure. So to achieve this complex organic growth, master storytellers understand that a story is best thought of as a story body, a living organism
A living thing.
made of interconnected subsystems like characters, plot, the moral argument, the symbolic environment, and so on. The spine of this body isn't the mechanical 3-act structure, it's a minimum of 7 key steps.
And what's critical about these steps?
What's critical is that they are absolutely organic. They're not arbitrary rules imposed by Hollywood executives or anything like that. They're induced from the premise itself. They reflect the universal psychological and moral stages any human being has to work through to solve a profound life problem. They map onto the process of maturation itself.
Okay, let's walk through this DNA then, the structural nucleus of the story. And let's focus on how these steps force the character to confront their internal failures, that's their true need.
That's their true need.
Yeah.
Step 1, weakness and need. This is where the hero begins. And they're not just flawed. They start with profound weaknesses, both psychological and moral, that are actively ruining their life.
Actively.
Yes. And the need is what the hero must fulfill to have a better life. And it always involves overcoming those weaknesses and changing fundamentally.
I think the Tootsie example you brought up before is perfect for this, for showing that difference between the surface problem and the deep need.
It is. In Tootsie, the hero Michael Dorsey is arrogant, he's selfish, he's a compulsive liar. Those are his weaknesses. His surface problem is that he's a great actor, but he's so overbearing and difficult that nobody in New York will hire him.
Right.
But his deep psychological need is to learn empathy and respect for women. And his moral need is to stop being so selfish and truly commit to something other than his own ego. The story has to force him into a situation where he has to address this need.
Okay. Which leads to step 2, desire.
Desire. This is the external, specific, concrete goal the hero sets out to achieve in this story. This is what drives the plot. And the key here is simplicity and specificity.
Why simple?
Because a clear, simple desire is easier for the audience to track, and it allows the writer to focus on the deep, complicated internal change that's really going on.
Got it.
Right. If you try to make the desire too abstract or complex, the plot just gets muddy. In Chinatown, Jake Gitt's desire is simple. Solve the mystery. Find out who killed Hollis Mulray and why. It's a limited, immediate goal.
But, and this is the crucial distinction for you, the listener.
Yeah.
That simple desire often masks a much deeper need.
Yes. For Jake, while the desire is to solve the murder, his psychological need is to overcome his own cocky arrogance, his reliance on cynicism, and his failure to protect women in his past.
So the plot is always about achieving the desire, but the story's real meaning rests entirely on the need that drives it, and how that need is addressed during the pursuit of the desire. If Jake Gitt had just solved the murder without having to confront his own cynicism.
It would have been a procedural, not a tragedy.
Exactly. The need gives the desire its meaning.
Which brings us to step 3, opponent. This is a character who competes directly with the hero for the same goal, or stands directly in their way. And the opponent is absolutely crucial, because they should ideally define the hero by embodying opposing values. And they often possess a strong, yet flawed, moral argument of their own.
Let's stick with Chinatown.
Okay. Jake Gitz desires the public truth about Hollis Mulray's death and this massive water conspiracy. His opponent is the rich, powerful, and utterly corrupted Noah Cross. And he's competing with Jake over whose version of the truth will be believed.
A battle of realities.
A battle of realities. Cross wants the world to believe Hollis drowned, hiding his incest and corruption. Jake wants the world to believe Cross killed him. It's not just a physical struggle. It's a battle of dark versus light, innocence versus deep generational corruption. The opponent has to provide the most resistance. If the opponent is weak, the hero is weak. The story falls flat.
Okay, so after the opponent, we have step 4, plan.
The plan. This is the sequence of actions the hero intends to take to achieve their desire. It's a roadmap, but crucially, it has to be flexible. The plan is continually frustrated by the opponent, which forces the hero to innovate.
Like in The Godfather.
Perfect example. Michael Corleone's initial plan is to stay separate from the family. But when his father is shot, his plan shifts. Kills Sollozzo and the police captain. Later, his plan expands to systematically eliminate the heads of the other crime families. The entire plot is a series of escalating, frustrated plans.
Which all leads to step 5, battle.
The battle. The final conflict where the hero confronts the opponent. And it doesn't have to be a physical fight. It can be a moral, political, or verbal confrontation. But the stakes must be existential to the hero's identity and their pursuit of the desire. This is the moment where all the accumulated pressure and planning comes to a head.
And right after the battle comes the climax.
Step 6, self-revelation. This is the structural climax, the emotional and intellectual peak of the entire story. It's the moment the hero learns who they truly are, shattering the facade of their old self, breaking free of old habits and weaknesses.
And it's so powerful because it stems directly from that battle with the opponent.
It has to. The opponent forces the hero to see the truth about themselves, whether they like it or not. This revelation either destroys the hero, like in classical tragedies, Oedipus, or in thrillers like Vertigo, or it makes them stronger.
The Tutsi self-revelation is such a beautiful summary of that change. It avoids being preachy, even though he says it out loud, because it directly addresses that weakness we identified back in step 1.
Right. Michael realizes, I was a better man with you as a woman than I ever was with a woman as a man.
I just got to learn to do it without the dress.
Exactly. He doesn't just win a role. He acknowledges the core moral failure that was ruining his life. That internal realization. That's the real victory.
Which brings us to the final step.
Step 7. New equilibrium. This is the new temporary state of rest after the change or failure to change has occurred. For heroes who rise, like, say, John McClane in Die Hard, the family is safe, the criminals are defeated, his relationship with his wife is reaffirmed, the world has changed because he has been tested.
And for heroes who fall.
For heroes who fall, like Oedipus, the equilibrium is one of devastation. The protagonist is left broken, isolated, or forever altered by the truth they uncovered.
And the key word there is temporary. As we'll get into later, a truly great story always implies that this new equilibrium is just a pause before the next cycle of desire begins. Okay, we've established the engine of action, that desire fueling the 7 steps of character growth. Now let's talk about the master blueprint of the story. How do writers move from a simple, fleeting idea to that complex, organic, 7-step structure? This is the grand strategy, and it starts with the premise.
Right, and the premise stage is, it's the tentative, flexible exploration phase. It's not the time for rigidity. You're putting out feelers in the dark. You're exploring possibilities to see what works and what forms an organic whole. This is the creative crucible.
And the advice here is pretty high standard, but it's invaluable.
It is. Write something that may change your life. If a story is that important to you, if it addresses a question you are wrestling with personally, it will carry that weight and importance through to the audience. You just can't fake that commitment.
That really sets the stakes for the writer. If you don't care deeply about the subject's moral or psychological implications, the audience won't either. But often, a simple one-line idea isn't enough to sustain that depth across, 100 pages or 2 hours of film.
No, it's not.
And that's where we move from the premise to this crucial structural concept.
Yeah.
The designing principle. Hashtag distinguishing premise from designing principle.
This distinction it's paramount for aspiring storytellers. The premise is the simple one-line story idea. It's what the story is about on the surface. It's the hook.
Okay.
The designing principle of the DP is the true intellectual breakthrough. It is the overall strategic logic that organizes the story as a whole, making all the parts hang together organically so the final result is greater than the sum of its parts.
So the DP is the writer's original vision, their specific take.
It is. And writers have to induce this principle from the premise. They shouldn't just mechanically impose a generic structure or genre onto it. This induction forces originality. It asks, what is the most unique, compelling way to tell this story, given my character and my theme?
So the designing principle is the filter that transforms a generic concept into a unique thematic exploration. If you, the listener, are stuck on your own project, thinking about the designing principle is the one thing that will separate your idea from every other generic story out there. Let's use some major examples. Show that critical difference between the surface idea and the strategic core.
Let's do it.
Let's take Tootsie again. The premise is pretty straightforward. An actor disguises himself as a woman to get a role. On its own, that's just a setup for slapstick comedy.
Right, you expect funny situations.
But the writer's designing principle elevates it. Force a male chauvinist to live as a woman.
And that strategic choice immediately shifts the focus. It's no longer about whether he gets the job. It's about whether he undergoes a moral reckoning under extreme pressure.
Okay, what about The Godfather? The premise is a story about a mafia family.
And that could be 100 different things. A police procedural, a simple heist movie. But the designing principle is so much grander. It turns it into a dark epic. Turn a simple crime story into a dark American epic where the head of the family is a king or the dark side's president.
Wow.
By making Don Corleone this tragic, powerful, almost King Lear figure, you suddenly open the door to Shakespearean tragedy. A fall, a succession, a cycle of violence. The film adopts the gravity and scale of an epic, not just the violence of a crime drama.
That same elevation happens in It's a Wonderful Life, the premise. An angel shows a suicidal man what the world would be like if he hadn't been born. It's a classic setup for a moral fantasy.
Sure, but the designing principle is express the power of the individual by showing what an entire town and implicitly a nation would be like if one man has never lived.
It transforms a personal crisis into a profound statement about human connection and societal value.
It does. And finally, in Citizen Kane, the designing principle is the structure itself. Use a number of storytellers to show that a man's life can never be known. The point isn't for the audience or the reporter to solve the mystery of Rosebud.
The point is the failure to solve it.
The failure to solve it, which reinforces the unknowability of human existence, and the fractured, contradictory structure of conflicting narratives reinforces that very idea. Hashtag character change using opposites, WAC.
So once that designing principle is locked in, the next major task is ensuring the hero's change is organic and believable, not arbitrary. And the key to this is using opposites. How do we make sure the transformation feels radical and earned rather than just incremental and boring?
That's the WAC formula. It's essentially the ultimate cheat sheet for ensuring your hero's journey is truly meaningful. If you want profound change, you have to start the hero somewhere far away from their ultimate action. We define the change using opposites. Weakness W is the opposite of the basic action A, and the change person C is the opposite of the weakness W.
Okay, and the basic action?
The basic action A has to be the one action best able to force the hero to confront their weaknesses and fundamentally change their life. If the hero's initial weaknesses were already similar to the action they take, well, they would just deepen those flaws. There would be no satisfying transformation, only confirmation.
That makes perfect structural sense. If a story starts with a hero who's already a skilled killer and the basic action is killing the villain, the story is just about plot mechanics. It's not about character development. The stakes aren't internal.
Precisely. Let's use The Godfather again, because it illustrates the dramatic necessity of this oppositional starting point. We define the basic action A as takes revenge and takes control of the family.
So if Michael Corleone had started as an eager gangster, his rise would just be tedious.
Exactly. So his W weakness must be the polar opposite of a vengeful, absolute ruler.
Right. Michael's initial state, his weakness, is defined as unconcerned, afraid of the violence.
Mainstream, legitimate, and crucially, emotionally and geographically separated from his mafia family. He's the clean-cut war hero. He's an outsider, seemingly a world away from the violence, which makes his decision to avenge his father so shocking and tragic.
Then his A, basic action, takes revenge by executing Sollozzo and the police captain and then taking control.
And his final C, changed person, becomes the cold, calculating, tyrannical, absolute ruler of the family. The starting point, the legitimate war hero, makes the final destination a radical but totally believable transformation. That distance between W and C is the source of the tragic weight. He loses his soul in the act of saving his family.
That contrast is it's essential for the depth. If the story hadn't used that WAC formula, we would never have experienced the pain of Michael's loss of innocence. We wouldn't care.
Not at all. Hashtag tag soapy world and symbolic layers. Moving from the internal character blueprint to the environment itself. A great story needs a setting, but the story world is so much more than just a backdrop. It's a vital subsystem. It's an active force. It has to be. The story world must be an expression of the hero. It has to show their weaknesses, their needs, and the obstacles they face. The physical story world condenses massive amounts of information, characters, plot, symbols, moral argument, into a limited space and time, which then expands infinitely in the minds of the audience.
So if the character's desire is the engine,
Then the world they inhabit isn't just the road, it's the environment specifically engineered to test that engine.
the opening of Vertigo is a perfect example of this condensation.
It's a masterclass in integration. That initial scene, you have the hero, Scotty, chasing a criminal over San Francisco rooftops. He slips, hangs by his fingertips, and is overwhelmed by his fear of heights, his vertigo,
And a fellow cop falls trying to save him.
which creates this paralyzing sense of guilt and responsibility that just haunts Scotty for the rest of the film. The physical world, the height, the rooftops, the steep San Francisco streets, immediately highlight Scotty's psychological weakness, his vertigo. And significantly, the killer later exploits that very weakness as the primary trick in getting away with murder.
The world is custom tailored to the weakness. It's not passive, it's destiny.
It is destiny.
And we see this powerful connection in plays, too, where the setting is inherently minimal but thematically maximal. Think of a streetcar named Desire.
Oh, absolutely.
Blanche is this fragile, self-deceptive woman who desperately wants to hide in a dream world of romance and southern gentility. Instead, she's thrust into a hot, cramped, terrifying New Orleans apartment, a pressure cooker right next to the noisy, chaotic streetcar line.
And this specific environment, this hellhole, ruled by the loud, primal, ape-like king, Stanley, it doesn't just hold the action. It actively accentuates her collapse.
It presses in on her.
The heat, the lack of privacy, the sheer claustrophobia relentlessly presses in on her until she breaks. The environment is active, suffocating the character until her dream world shatters.
Okay, let's detail some of these natural settings and the specific deep meanings they carry, which a writer can then leverage to support the theme and the character arc.
Let's start with the ocean. It's inherently complex, and it's often divided into the surface and the deep. The surface is like a flat, abstract chessboard, the site of surface contests, where rules are known and men engage in games of skill. It intensifies the sense of contest and calculation.
And the deep?
The deep, conversely, is this three-dimensional weightless landscape. It's the realm of the subconscious. It can represent utopia, a dream world, a lost civilization, but also a terrifying graveyard, holding ancient secrets and forgotten worlds, ready to swallow the surface dwellers and their rationality. Think of the psychological horror in deep-sea settings versus the clean contest of a yacht race.
Then you have the jumble. The state of pure nature, but its defining characteristic in drama isn't abundance, it's suffocation.
Suffocation. Everything is dense, everything is grabbing the characters, constantly resisting human order. It reduces man to a beast, and it's one of the settings most often used to express the theory of evolution.
As in Heart of Darkness.
Vividly. The heat, the humidity, the buzzing insects, the constant decay. It's an environment that strips away civilization and forces a confrontation with the primal self.
And the mountain is the opposite.
The opposite. It's the land of greatness, of seclusion, the site of revelation and insight. It's the high place where the prophet or the natural philosopher goes to confront the forces of nature in their purest form, often resulting in a great moment of discovery.
So structurally, the mountain is often connected to a major reveal.
Exactly. A reveal that kicks the plot to a higher level of intensity. But conversely, it's also often depicted as the site of hierarchy, privilege, and tyranny lording over those struggling below in the valley. Hashtag man-made spaces and miniatures.
Man-made spaces, particularly the house, are crucial because they act as a microcosm, condensing society and its values. The house is the central unit of social life and drama. It represents safety, protection, the large cradle where life begins.
But that safety is always contrasted by its opposite. The potential for adventure that beckons from the window, and the vulnerability from the outside world. Inside the house can be a warm house, which is big and diverse, a place for individual uniqueness to thrive. Writers use the buzzing household technique to show an extended family thriving in community, accommodating differences, like the sprawling, singing, supportive family in Meet Me in St. Louis.
Or it can be the terrifying house.
Yes. And this structure is small, cramped, with paper-thin walls and no separate cozy corners, jamming the family together. With no escape, the family becomes a unit of never-ending conflict, a pressure cooker that eventually explodes.
Like in Death of a Salesman.
Vividly, where the cramped, modern subdivision surrounds the Loman house, metaphorically suffocating Willie's outdated dreams, or the sterile, perfect suburban facade that eventually cracks in American Beauty.
The internal parts of a house also carry weight.
Huge thematic weight. The cellar often functions as the graveyard, a place of buried family secrets, where the past waits to emerge. The attic is the opposite, the head of the house, the site of madness, memories, or treasures. Using these spaces allows the writer to define the family's moral geography.
And then there are miniatures.
Miniatures. These are societies or lives shrunk down to clarify the values of the larger world. They act as a great condenser expander. They show the audience what truly matters to the hero, often standing in as value-laden metaphors.
And Citizen Kane is built on these.
The entire story is built on miniatures, all highly value-laden pictures of a rich, lonely, and often tyrannical man. The glass ball paperweight, dropped and shattered in Kane's dying moment, is a miniature of his lost, idealized childhood, a moment of purity he could never recapture.
The newsreel is his life story in miniature, but from a cold, distant perspective that totally misses the human truth.
And of course, Xanadu, his vast, isolated estate, is a miniature of the entire world he tried to recreate and control behind walls, collecting things to fill an unfillable emotional void. The strategic choice to use so many miniatures supports that DP, that a man's life can never truly be known no matter how many perspectives you gather. The miniature is a reflection of an incomplete, fractured understanding. The power of symbolic themes.
So when master writers want to embed these complex moral arguments without becoming preachy or overly intellectual, they rely on the symbol web.
They have to. Symbolic themes encapsulate entire moral arguments, achieving the highest concentration of meaning and emotional impact. Because if a writer simply tells the audience the theme, they stop listening. They have to experience it through symbol.
But this is highly risky. If the symbol is clumsy or obvious, it becomes preachy and sermonizing. It needs elegance.
A stunning example of elegance is The Great Gatsby, which uses a web of 3 major symbols across the landscape to crystallize the thematic sequence of the corrupted American dream.
Let's break it down.
First, there's the green light at the end of Daisy's dock. It represents the modern, perverted American dream. It's what Gatsby is reaching for, the material wealth that he believes will grant him access to the past. It reduces a vast spiritual goal to a specific, measurable, but ultimately empty material asset.
Second, we have that chilling image of the spectacles billboard of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg watching over the Valley of Ashes, the dump.
Right. And this stands for America behind the glittering, material surface used up, mechanical refuse. It suggests that the relentless industrial pursuit of the green light has created a vast, machine-eaten garden where the spectacle of God, the eye doctor's advertisement, watches over the spiritual waste.
And the final symbol, which Nick introduces on the very last page,
is the fresh green breast of the New World, the original natural potential of America, a second chance at Eden before civilization ruined it. Fitzgerald introduces this shock of contrast at the very end, after Nick's self-revelation about the futility of Gatsby's quest, making the thematic revelation just explode in the audience's mind through stark juxtaposition. That is structural brilliance, embedding the moral argument into the visual landscape itself.
Now, on a completely different note, you have Forrest Gump, which uses the feather and the box of chocolates. On the surface, they seem almost cartoonishly simple.
They're deceptively simple, but they work because they are perfectly justified by the story's designing principle and the hero's nature. The feather represents Forrest's free spirit and open, easygoing way of life, floating without direction, but always landing safely.
And the box of chocolates
Is a direct thematic platitude. Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get.
Which would feel lazy from another character.
Lazy and preachy. But it works here because the story itself is a meandering myth form, covering 40 years, much like the feather floating, and the hero is a simpleton who naturally thinks and speaks in easy-to-remember platitudes. The simplicity of the symbols aligns perfectly with the simplicity of the protagonist's worldview. It justifies their use. #4V, plot dynamics and execution.
Plot is so often misunderstood as just a sequence of events, but structurally, it's a strategy derived from nature that drives character development. It's the choreography of conflict. So how do master storytellers choose the basic shape of their narrative?
Well, they look to the great patterns found in nature, rivers, trees, explosions. We can identify 4 primary story forms or structures, and each one serves a different thematic purpose.
Okay, let's start with the most common one.
The linear story. It's the arrow. It tracks a single main character from beginning to end, implying a historical explanation for what happens. The focus is on one hero pursuing a single desire with great intensity. This is the structure of most Hollywood action films or thrillers. We follow a straight line from W, weakness, to C, change, through A, action. It's the most common form because it's the most efficient for building suspense.
Then we have the meandering story.
Right. This follows a winding path without any apparent direction, like rivers or snakes or the complex nonlinear processes of the brain. There's no straight line to the end. It often favors the spiral, where a character keeps returning to a single memory, fear, or event, exploring it at progressively deeper, more emotional levels rather than just moving forward.
So this is for more internal character-driven dramas, stories focused on memory and trauma.
Exactly. The true goal isn't external, like solving a murder, but internal, like reconciling with the past. The plot moves, but the character keeps circling back to the source of their weakness.
The branching story is structurally fascinating. It's like a tree or a river basin, where paths extend from central points by splitting and adding smaller and smaller parts.
This form is used when the writer wants to explore an entire society, or detailed stages of the same society, rather than focusing solely on one hero. Each branch usually represents a complete perspective or a self-contained subplot, allowing the writer to build a rich tapestry.
Like in massive social fantasies like Gulliver's Travels or multiple hero stories like Robert Altman's Nashville.
Yes, where we track dozens of interconnected characters to paint a picture of an entire industry or culture.
And finally, the explosive story.
In nature, this looks like a starburst or a volcano, with multiple paths extending simultaneously outward from a central event. In storytelling, you can't literally show everything at once, so this form gives the appearance of simultaneity.
And that appearance is achieved through the cross-cut technique in film.
Primarily, yes. This form emphasizes connections and comparisons between elements in the story world and implies a comparative explanation for what happens. We are meant to compare the simultaneous lines of action to derive a larger thematic truth. Hashtag the role of revelations.
But regardless of the story form you choose, the quality of the plot depends absolutely on the quality of the revelations. These are the surprises, the new pieces of information the hero or the audience discovers. They are, as you described them, the crucial gears of the plot.
Indeed. If a character makes a plan, and that plan is thwarted by new, unexpected information, they are forced to change. That moment of discovery, that revelation, is the gear shifting the story into a new stage of intensity.
And there are fundamental rules for these gears.
There are. Revelations must be logical, meaning that they occur in the order the hero would most likely learn of them, building upon previous knowledge.
But most critically, they have to be progressively stronger and occur at an increasing pace over the course of the story.
Think of it like driving a car. You don't start in fourth gear. The first gear, the first revelation, is necessary to get the car moving, but it's small. By the time you hit the climax, you are in fifth gear, and the revelations are coming fast and hard, often simultaneously, causing the plot to thicken and accelerate dramatically.
So the information has to be important enough to cause the hero to make a decision.
And fundamentally change their course of action, their plan, or their motive. If the revelation doesn't change one of those 3 things, it doesn't function as a gear, and it should be cut.
That's a wonderful diagnostic tool for any writer. Does this piece of information force my hero to pivot? If not, it's information overload, not plot. Hashtag scene construction and dialogue.
Exactly.
So taking this down to the micro level, even individual scenes have to feel organic, not mechanical, to sustain the overall integrity of the narrative. A scene, we are told, is essentially a mini-story.
A good scene must contain its own dramatic arc. It should contain 6 of the 7 structure steps we discussed earlier: weakness, desire, opponent, plan, battle, and a twist or reveal, which replaces the final self-revelation that's reserved for the overall hero arc.
So a scene starts with a character wanting something specific.
In that conversation, confronting resistance, executing a mini-plan, and ending with a small change or a twist of information.
And the key production tip for efficiency here is essential. Start the scene as late as possible without losing any necessary structure elements.
Right. Avoid the mistake of starting early to be realistic, showing the characters arriving, saying hello, discussing the weather.
Which typically just makes the scene dull. Start right at the moment of conflict.
And once that scene structure is set, the dialogue brings it to life. This is where we move past simple one-track writing and utilize what the sources call symphonic dialogue. Multiple tracks playing simultaneously, adding depth and resonance.
And most professional writers manage only one track. The masters manage 2 or 3.
Okay, what's track one? Track one is the melody, or story dialogue. This is the basic, necessary dialogue explaining what is happening in the plot. Where did the money go? I hid it in the vault. It's functional. Most genre writers stop here.
Then track 2 is harmony, or moral dialogue.
This provides the depth, the texture, the scope. It's not just talking about the events, but talking about right and wrong, values, or deeper attitudes toward those events. This is where the story truly compares 2 or more ways of life.
And the textbook example of this moral dialogue
Is the argument between George Bailey and Mr. Potter in It's a Wonderful Life? They're arguing over the values of the building and loan. The entire philosophical conflict of the film is focused down to George's passionate defense of his life's work, ending with him declaring that the people he helped, like the Martini family, are richer because of their home ownership.
Potter defines richer by money and power. George defines richer by contribution and human connection.
Exactly. The dialogue is profoundly political and moral, defining 2 opposing worldviews without ever sounding academic or preachy, because it's deeply emotional and personal.
And finally, track 3 is keywords, phrases, and taglines.
Right. Repetition and variation of these elements function like a musical leitmotif, reinforcing theme or character identity throughout the entire story. Think of a repeated phrase that sums up a character's philosophy, like Rosebud or Forget it, Jake, it's Chinatown. They act as thematic anchors. Hashtag the crosscut technique in action.
Okay, let's return to that explosive structure in the crosscut technique, as it is probably the most powerful method for integrating plot and moral argument in film.
It's incredibly powerful. The crosscut cutting back and forth between 2 lines of action, it creates tension and suspense, yes. But more importantly, it compares 2 lines of action and makes them equal in the mind of the audience. It expands the thematic pattern to include the entire society.
I think the Godfather crosscut scene deserves a full analysis, because it is perhaps the highest achievement of this technique in modern cinema.
Oh, absolutely. The film juxtaposes Michael Corleone acting as the religious godfather at his nephew's baptism, renouncing Satan and gaining the height of his power as the new Don, with his men simultaneously committing the mass murders of his enemies across New York.
The timing is just chilling.
The genius is the timing. As Michael answers the priest's questions, "Do you renounce Satan?" the scene cuts to a sniper taking out a rival boss. As Michael answers, "I do," the next murder happens. The structure itself is delivering the moral argument.
The crosscut shows the audience with brutal clarity.
Michael becoming Satan at the exact moment he gains the moral and political height of his power as the new Don.
It shows us his soul dying right when he's outwardly succeeding. That tension is what makes the structure stick with you forever. The parallel action expands the thematic pattern far beyond Michael's personal vengeance. It makes a definitive statement about the nature of power, evil, and the Corleone family's tragic destiny within the American system.
It's masterful technique, a complex moral argument embedded directly, physically, into the plot structure itself. Check V, the never-ending story. Outro.
We've spent this deep dive exploring how desire, organic structure, symbolic worlds, and choreographed plot dynamics combine to create this immersive, powerful experience. But the highest goal of the storyteller is creating the story that lives forever, the one that keeps affecting the audience long after they've finished watching or reading.
It does this by aggressively avoiding what we call false endings. There are 3 main kinds: premature, arbitrary, or closed. A premature ending stops before the character has truly changed. An arbitrary end, like the ending of Adventures of Huckleberry Finn after the raft journey, where a deus ex machina is used to force the plot to a conclusion, disappoints the audience because the story didn't track development organically.
And the most common structural error, which is crucial for you, the listener, to avoid, is the closed ending. This happens when the hero achieves a simple goal, gains a simple self-revelation, and ends in a calm, new equilibrium, making the audience feel the story is definitively complete. The system has come to rest.
But that goes against the very code of growth that fuels the narrative. Desire never truly stops. Equilibrium is temporary. And self-revelation is never simple enough to guarantee a satisfying life forever. If the story closes the door completely, the audience forgets it.
So a great story has to signal the audience to go back.
It has to signal the audience to go back to the beginning and experience it again, making it an endless cycle, a Mobius strip where the story is always different because the audience is always rethinking it in light of what just happened.
So how do they create that immortality? How do they leave that door ajar?
By using every system of the story body, not just relying on plot, they weave a complex tapestry of character, plot, theme, symbol, scene, and dialogue. When the elements are so intertwined and layered like in Citizen Kane or The Godfather, the permutations of meaning are infinite. Because the audience is constantly finding new depths and connections, the story never dies. It lives on in the audience's active critical engagement.
The ultimate insight, which should challenge the listener, is related to the purpose of the storyteller. We often focus on the hero's ultimate achievement or action, but sometimes the greatest truth comes from the mystery that remains unsolved, the truth that remains just out of reach. In stories like Citizen Kane and Heart of Darkness, the hero's dying words, Rosebud, or the horror, do not solve the final mystery. They don't provide the last key to understand a life. Instead, they reinforce the painful idea that the true, singular meaning of a life is fundamentally unknowable, and that finding meaning is an ongoing process of living, not something revealed only at death. The story's greatest accomplishment is not the heroic action, but the truth and beauty found in the act of creativity and storytelling.